Perhaps no game has changed gaming more than Bungie's 2001 first-person shooter Halo Combat Evolved. Recently, I had a friend ask, why is Halo so beloved? I played it and it seems fairly generic. And they're right. Going back now, it seems like most other first-person shooters nowadays. So why is Halo so important for gaming? Well, it's mostly because they created the formula. Ignoring the construction of their own engine, which was not the norm at the time, they also brought new life into the gameplay. First off was by limiting your weapon options. Players were only able to have 2 weapons at a time, which meant you had to choose which ones to use. You had to pick which ones you'd take with you to deal with the fights in a match. It also made combat more interesting, because you'd have to strategize on how to fight someone based on what guns they were using and which ones you had. Each weapon had different strengths and weaknesses, and you needed to play around them to win. It also gave players a decent health pool, so skirmishes lasted a while. Fights weren't always just who saw the other person or shot first, like in many realistic shooters. And the player's health bar, or shield, would recharge. In other games before Halo, I remember having to run around maps to find health packs to restore my health after every fight, which of course slowed the pacing of the action. It also introduced the idea that grenades should be separate from weapons. Playing some old games, to use a throwable weapon, you'd need to swap to that throwable as a weapon. That made it really awkward, but Halo got around that by being able to throw grenades and other throwables right away, so the action never stops. But I think most importantly was the way Halo mapped their controls to the Xbox controller. Believe it or not, before Halo there was no standard way to use controls for first-person shooters. And each game tried to tackle this differently. Just think of any N64 first-person shooter. They were awkward. Halo used the left stick for moving and the right for looking, which is now the default and most used controller setup on consoles. And that's for pretty much every game with characters that are moving, not just for first-person shooters. Then, of course, you can't forget vehicles. Vehicles were an integral part of the gameplay of Halo. Even in multiplayer, vehicles were where some of the most fun was had. And yes, that includes... You gotta be honest, it's not. I can't see where I'm going. And of course, Halo had an incredible soundtrack. Combine all that with a solid story, and you've got yourself a hit game in 2001 and beyond. In fact, Halo is such a behemoth of a franchise that just the first 3 Halos alone sold almost 20 million copies. 4 games released on a single console from 2001 to 2007. And every game since, from Call of Duty to Fortnite, owes something to Halo. Because you have to understand that all these things I talked about, they seem like nothing special individually. You go back now and play Halo without having been there from its inception, and you probably won't be that impressed. You might think, so what? It's a standard first-person shooter. But Halo came out in 2001. That's before any of these games. At the time, Halo brought in all these elements together into something new and exciting, to a place where first-person shooter games were not very popular. The console market. Believe it or not, first-person shooters were pretty much a staple of only the PC at the time, because companies thought they didn't fit on the consoles very well. Nowadays, that's changed drastically, obviously, and first-person shooters are staples of every console. Well, Halo wasn't really the first to do any of these things specifically, but they were the first to execute it very well and bring all these elements together, blended into a cohesive and amazingly fun game. Throw in Xbox Live for the sequel, and nothing was going to stop Halo from soaring to success. Halo was such a monumental step forward, literally evolving combat in gaming, starting careers, shaping esports, and making everyone rethink what multiplayer could be. So, with a revival of interest in Halo, if you're looking to try something fun and want to see how first-person shooters really came together, grab some friends and check out